Whenever you're
How's
ready.
it going, Jake?
What's going on, Mark?
Can you believe we've hit 1,000 subscribers on the new Reef Therapy channel?
Um, I know that the vast majority of the listeners are consuming Reef Therapy sessions on their favorite podcatchers on Spotify, Google Play, and Apple Music. But the YouTube channel is where we have a little bit more interaction and where we can field some questions. And I'm actually quite surprised at the viewership on a separate, YouTube channel, the Reef Therapy YouTube channel, and already hitting 1,000 subscribers, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And if you're a subscriber on Reef Therapy, make sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss a session.
Yeah, that was great to see that climb up so quickly. It was. I know you guys have it all figured out with the YouTube algos and all that stuff. But when we moved it over, I was like, oh, I hope we don't lose anybody. But I think we beat that horse to death that the source would be moving. So I'm glad everybody found us over there. So.
Yeah, no, and it's a great place to field questions and comments and feedback about the future sessions we want to have regarding reef therapy. And I do believe you've grabbed a few questions from the last one. So I just want to thank everybody for the massive response and the feedback, the comments. Sometimes we talk about stuff and we don't really know how it's landing. I mean, obviously, this is just therapy to talk about our reef tanks. It's been a week of reefing, man. There's been a lot going on, but I think we kick it off with some Q&A. What do you think?
Yeah, we can do that. And I also want to try to make it about because sometimes it's not a question; it's a good comment, right, or good feedback, or something that stirs the conversation. So. Let's see. One that I thought was interesting, and that's more directed at you. You mentioned if they had a standalone Trident. And I saw a couple of comments, people bringing up the Alcatronic and the Mastertronic. If you had any interest in those, because they are standalone.
Oh, man.
And I did not prepare you for these questions.
Do you know how easy? I don't know, man. If I had a commercial setup, it would make a lot more sense to have one machine just doing alkalinity.
Yeah.
But I can test alkalinity in like 90 seconds. I had thought about it for a second. It's a little bit longer than a minute. It's not quite 2 minutes, but we test all the chemistry on 6 systems here in 30 minutes. We have a very serialized process with the pipetter, and it just goes by so fast. And the thing is, there's just so many moving parts to one of those machines. And I wouldn't even ever want it to dose. I don't trust the machine enough to auto dose and try to hold an alkalinity level, right? It's got to pull water in, it's got to push water out, it's got to pull for the reagent, it's got to, the pH probe has to work, the software has to work, the Wi-Fi connection and cloud connectivity. Like, there's just so many moving pieces, whereas over here I can literally just neutralize the base and look at the pH. It's just such a simple fundamental thing. It's just, no, not yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think they're really cool. I think all the automated testing stuff is cool, but I'm not one to do a lot of testing. So the price to benefit ratio for me personally isn't there. They're not cheap. I think they're incredibly cool, and it'd be fun to play with one, but I just can't justify the cost for, that kind of insight. And I don't know what I would do with it. I mean, if I had that information on a tank like mine, example. Right? I'm not an SBS, crazy head anymore. And what would I do with that information? I admire them from afar. Yeah.
You always have to fight the urge. But here's a perfect example of why I'm just not sold on like most of these water testing robots. You remember a little machine called the KH Guardian?
Yep.
Yeah, that came out like a year or two before the Alcatronic. No one uses that anymore. You can't even give them away, right? And that was supposed to be like, just a magical machine. And it's improving so quickly that who knows, if a very reliable alkalinity probe is going to come out sometime in the future. Everything gets miniaturized over time, and yeah.
Yeah.
What else you got?
All right. Let's see. Here's some straightforward ones. There's a question from Big Bear Meets Little Bear about Goniopora or Goniopora, however you want to pronounce it. Do you feed your Gonioporas? Some people say it's feeding them. That's why they live now, or can they just live off of fish poop? Are gonies living and being fed evidence of food working for at least one coral type?
That's a tricky one because
it's directed
really
at you, but yeah, go for it.
It's, the red gonies have always lived for some reason. They just do their own thing. And I know like a lot of even successful Goniopora flower pot coral farmers will say they feed their coral. But man, I've looked at them. I've looked at them really hard. It's really hard to make out food going into the mouth the way you can with a blasto or a disc coral or any kind of meaty LPS. And, I don't know that the relationship has been established that food's actually going on the coral versus actually introducing some nutrients into your aquariums. But I really think Julian Sprung, there's our token Sprung reference for the session. I think he got it right about 20 years ago when he said it was iron and manganese. And I've talked to some other, guys who are really watching the parameters. And one guy's like overdriving with manganese. He's like, man, they don't even look like gonies anymore. They just look like anemones because the tentacles are so long. But that's just, kind of a fine line to walk, the iron and the manganese. But with more testing, hopefully we can not maintain manganese on any particular level, just not overshoot it to the point where it becomes detrimental to the aquarium. So I think manganese and just better salts, better additives overall.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's an example. I think it was directed at maybe my skepticism about food actually being a big game changer on corals, right? Because I brought up, show me. I think I brought up the aposymbiotic corals or the non-photosynthetic stuff, but I wouldn't call it an example of like see food's working, because I think success with the gonies isn't just exclusive to people that are feeding it, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
One that I liked, and I won't read the whole paragraph, but because the first sentence says it all. But I think this was in regards to maybe us critiquing some of the coral prices and the live sales and stuff like that. But whatever happened to shopping local, and that was by Dwayne H. And I feel like we did talk about that because you I mean, even in a more recent episode, you talked about picking up used fish or
all
corals and yeah.
All the time. That's what I look for when I go into a local fish store. I'm not looking for new stock. I'm not looking for micro frags. Maybe grab a couple, odds and ends that I need to make it all go well. But I'm always just looking for the coral that was obviously traded in from a tank teardown or an oversized fish that outgrew someone else's tank. I don't know if I mentioned this, but a couple weeks ago I got a large coal tang that I wrote about today. He is so beautiful. Like I just never even knew that they got that attractive.
Oh yeah, man. Especially they get that subtle orange in the fins and stuff.
Yeah, the pectoral fin is a subtle orange and good lighting. The stripes are really just like, hovering around blue. The eye patch is like really big and prominent yellow. But yeah, he's like, every bit of 6 inches and just a perfect aquarium fish. So yeah, I support local all the time. I mean, that's my jam. The thing is, you can't really share a link, on the forums or the groups to something you found locally, right? You can snap a picture and then upload it and then write a thread versus just do a quick share. So we're all about buying local, supporting local. And I think that'll be increasingly obvious as we get a little closer to local fish store Saturday.
All right, I'll give you one more. One of them, so there's 2 questions, but one of them is more related to one of the subjects you want to talk about later. So maybe we just save the question for then. But the other one is, and I think we talked about this in a sense indirectly, but is there such a thing as too many corals for a system, whether it be a nano or a larger tank? Would it cause too many rapid imbalances in minor or major trace elements, assuming you're able to keep major elements stable? I don't even think about it in terms of imbalance or trace elements. I just think about it in the terms of you would be amazingly surprised at how big corals can get. And so in terms of too many corals, and again, depends on what coral we're talking about, because you can bonsai SPS all day long, but
Right.
I do
I would
think
say
there is,
a
go
better
ahead.
way to phrase that question is probably the ratio of coral mass to water volume, right? When it comes to absorbing nutrients, minerals, trace elements, or general respiration, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about 100 corals taking up 90% of the space or one big coral taking up 90% of the volume, right? But I mean, I love solving questions with thought experiments. If you have a 100-gallon tank and 1 gallon of coral, that coral is just going to have such a huge reservoir of everything it needs. And it's going to take a long time for it to move the needle as far as the levels of those things.
Yeah.
Conversely, if you have 99 gallons of volume of living coral tissue in a 100-gallon tank, they're going to suck it up real fast. So, this is one of those reasons that larger tanks, quote unquote, do better. They don't necessarily do better, but the reservoir of everything is always there. And we're not talking about calcium, alkalinity, magnesium. We are such a masters at replenishing those things. It's more of the rest. The dissolved organic carbon, dissolved organic material, all the esoteric trace elements that we can't quite put our finger on. So you have to find that out for yourself. If you had a tank that was full of some basically slow-growing cryptic Stylosiniella, that's not the same thing as having a tank full of, super fast-growing staghorns or a table acro.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I think that's a really good answer to that. Because I think the ratio does, that in that regard, it does matter, right? So
I think that's the most important one. So
okay.
did you, I know you had a ticket to MACNA in person in Atlanta that was supposed to be this weekend, but were you able to catch any of the online activity regarding MACNA this weekend?
I debated it strongly, but it was a 3-day weekend. It was Labor Day weekend. The weather was good, and I just did not picture myself, no offense to Masna or MACNA, I didn't picture myself sitting behind a computer for hours and hours a day on a weekend when, that's pretty much all I do for my job. And I don't want to say I was irked, because that's even too strong of a word for how I felt.
Let it out, brother. Just vent a little bit.
Well, no, I was really excited about a local MACNA for me, right? I just down the road. I live in Atlanta, so I was stoked that this was coming to my town. And then, of course, due to COVID, they canceled it and transferred it to a virtual event, which is great. But then they took my, $150 and said, okay, you now have a credit to go to Milwaukee. But if you wanted to do the virtual event, you got to pay another $50. And maybe I misinterpreted the email. I reread it because I figured you were going to ask this. And I think I'm right in that. And I found that rather annoying. One, I don't know what I'm doing in 2022. I don't know if I want to go to Wisconsin. I love Wisconsin. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful state. But I don't know if I have plans to go do that next year. The part of the MACNA deal for me was that it was local, so that doesn't mean I can go somewhere remote. I would have been fine if they gave me 100 of the 150 back and then enrolled me for the virtual for the remaining 50 or something like that. And then I could have maybe during the slow periods of my weekend jumped on and, hey, what's going on? But I don't know. I was mildly irked by that. Yeah.
That's what I did. I didn't, post up at my computer, but I just kind of dropped in a few different times on Friday and on Saturday. Yeah. And, the first few presentations, I got to say, man, seeing a video presentation without any videos, it's like, come on, what year is this? It was very new and novel to include some video clips like 12 years ago, when you're presenting a keynote or a PowerPoint presentation. But now when people are using video to watch your presentation and you have static slides, like, come on, just try a little harder, and don't put up a single picture or a single slide with 3 bullet points and then talk at me for like 5 minutes. There needs to be a little bit more compelling content in
Mm-hmm.
the presentation. So on the flip side, Koji Wada-san of Blue Harbor, he did a presentation and he talked about collecting all the rare fish over like the last 10 years with choppy but actual videos of the fish. So I was like, oh yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
And it's weird because like, I know they have the live aspect of it that they want to push, but oh man, the interaction and stuff was really light. There was I know there's some like after hour stuff going on. But if you're a Mazda member, you can just watch the videos in the highest quality on your own time later on. And I'm like, I think it's cheaper to be a Mazda member than to sign up for Macna online. So I think they need to
Yeah.
work on that value proposition. But at the same time, right before that, they announced a new kind of mid-year show called Aquatic Expo, which is going to be in Atlanta.
Yeah, and I'm happy about that because again, the local factor, and I actually think it's cool that they're bringing in the freshwater component as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
to me that's a whole area of the hobby that I enjoy as well, right? So to mix the two, and I've never been to an aquashella, but from what I gather is that's a hybrid type of situation too of having both saltwater and freshwater. So
No, no, it's
it
not.
isn't. Oh,
It
okay.
isn't. It's a warehouse, and on one side you have saltwater, and the other side you have freshwater, and there's almost like no conversation. Maybe like a company
Ah,
like Seache or Ecotech Marine, sells products with crossover potential. But man, you know how deep my freshwater roots go, and I
yeah.
was at Aquashella trying to talk to some of these freshwater content creators, and it's like I had learned within about a few interactions to just keep it on the down low that I'm actually a saltwater content creator. Because the moment you say something, do you know what the freshwater people called saltwater people?
What?
The dark side.
The dark
Even though our tanks
side.
are like, oh yeah, don't go to the dark side, don't go. That's what they say. I've heard it for years, and I'm like, my tank is brighter than 5 of your tanks.
Yeah.
What are you calling dark side, man? But yeah, it's you would think there'd be a lot more of that cross pollination and just learning from different techniques, and maybe that's something that can be massaged over time, but not really. And one thing I do miss about Macna, right? Because this is the second year in a row we haven't had a physical Macna.
Hmm.
I miss the industry folks. The Aquashellas and Reef Blues and Reef Stocks. Just a lot of hustling, a lot of vending, and just selling some products, selling some tanks, selling some livestock, and I miss kind of the old guard that you find at Mazna, and definitely a lot more international representation, so you can find out more about the macro scale of what's going on in the local economies or industries or markets or hobbies. I kind of miss that, so I hope to see more of that at Aquatic Expo. And here's a great primer for the listeners and the viewers. I would love to do Reef Therapy live, you and me just sitting down, talking, NPR style at a desk as one of the presentations of Aqua Expo. Yeah, that's what it's called, Aquatic Expo.
Sign
How
me
you
up.
like them apples?
I'm in.
All right. Well,
Um,
if you guys want to see that, or you want to attend that, or you want to happen, tell somebody at your club or Mazna or Macna, and let us know in the comments. Because I think it can kind of be fun for people to see how we do it live.
I'm in. Count me in.
Yeah, I don't know if we would stream it live. I don't know. Wouldn't look into that, but we definitely record it and make that available later.
Yeah, yeah, and we could take questions or whatever in some format, to kind of have those, jumping off points for conversation.
Yeah.
That the one thing I
Speaking
didn't
of
like
which,
about, yeah, go ahead.
speaking of which, before I forget, I'm going to be in Houston for my first kind of talky talk. Like I go to shows all the time, but the speaker aspect has definitely taken a back door and then a back seat and then a back closet to these Reef Aquarium shows, some of them. So I'm going to be giving an actual presentation at Reef Currents in Houston this Saturday. I think it's just a one-day show. And I'm literally eating my own dog food. There's no keynote. There's no PowerPoint. There's no photographs. It is nonstop video. It's just going to be one giant long video where I show off some of the coolest corals I've seen in the wild. Some of them are like bigger colonies or nicer colors, but obviously there's just a lot of weirdo corals that we either never see in the aquarium hobby or haven't seen in the aquarium hobby for a long time, because I feel like that'll be really awesome to show folks like, hey, this small coral is about 3 feet across. So
is that going to be available to watch after the fact for non-Houston residents, or?
Not that I know of, but I think I'm going to use that same talk for Aquashella Dallas, and I'll make it available in some way, shape, or form in the future, because I'm not going to go through all the trouble to put together a video that I only present to 2 different crowds. That'll come out on the Reef Builders channel.
You're touching upon one thing that I did not like about this Aquatic Expo, is that they mentioned no speakers. Yeah, I think I read that it's mostly just an exhibit type thing, right? That they're not going to do the long format. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Never mind. We're going to rent the hall next door, and we're going to do our own show.
Well, it just, because I usually, I mean, there's always a few talks at Macton where you're like, okay, I'm sure somebody's benefiting from this, but I'm not. But then there's always a good handful of talks that just blow my mind, where I walk away and I'm inspired by it. Maybe I didn't learn something new, but I'm inspired, or they just totally blew my mind, So that part I was a bit bummed about.
Together, as far as showing people videos of corals that they never see, one thing that melted my brain on the spot was when Charlie Varon was giving a talk a handful of Macnos ago, and he said Isopora prolifera, which is kind of a sister group to the acros, the catspot acro, is the most common coral in the world, or at least reef building coral in the world. And it just it dawned on me, and then I've been diving and seen them, like they protect the shores like an elkhorn would, and you're like, oh yeah, the most common acro in the world is almost never in the aquarium hobby. There's one strain that's kind of like fleshy brown, almost reddish with green polyps, that gets sold as a Montipora because no one grows it big enough to have arm-sized branches.
Oh wow!
But that was one of those moments that like really blew my mind when Varon was saying that Isopora prolifera was just hands down, not even close, the most abundant coral, reef building coral in the world. What was some good moments for you?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of something more recent, but the one that immediately came to my brain was listening to 80 talk in person long ago to my first MACNA, and just talking about these experiments where they did not allow herbivores access to a portion of the reef. Basically just cordoned it off, and the whole thing just overgrew with algae. And that just forever cemented in my head that combating algae by nutrient control or chemicals or, like phosphate limitation is kind of pointless. And not pointless, but if you're starving out algae, what else are you starving out? And it just, to me, it's like it's all about the herbivores, right? Yeah. But that was a long time ago. No, I mean, even the one in Fort Lauderdale we were in, I'm trying to think, there was a talk there that just got me, but I can't think of it off the top of my head right now. I did enjoy Vincent's talks. Oh
my God. When he said people are buying pictures of corals and not corals, that still crystallized in my brain. It just epitomizes a whole subset of contemporary reefers who, when you see their aquarium, you're like, oh wow, I'm sure you spent a lot more time on reef forums than actually in front of your tank observing things.
Yeah. And just his insight, because when I first met him, I really had no clue about coral farming. I knew it, I saw the pictures in the magazines and stuff, but just how much is involved in that, that blew my mind, the whole mariculture piece.
10 times more involved than someone who has a slight idea of what's involved. at
Yeah.
least 10 times. I'm sure, his French personality came through and he just ranted and vented at you. And he was right. It's like, he's never going to be, like forced out of business. He'll be regulated out of business from just these mountains of paperwork in order to do everything. But I have a good segue about your topic on herbivores.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do it.
I got an awesome fish haul last week. I was
Beyond the mega coal tank?
Yeah. The coal tang was just a trade-in at Merman's Reef, one of my local fish stores. This other one, someone was trying to sell a yellow tang, wild, perfect, flawless, that they had acquired from a tank. I don't remember the entire situation for their tank teardown, but they ended up like throwing in all the fish, and then I was like, all right. So Saturday, I got a used yellow tang, a used purple tang, a used Tomini tang, a Royal Grandma, a checkerboard wrasse, which I love. I've wanted to get one. I just haven't done it for a long time. I think they're just so underrated. People have no idea how beautiful those things get. I got all those guys, plus the most vicious pair of maroon alaris and 2 green bubble tips for less than what you'd consider to be a good deal on just a yellow tang.
Wow. That is a haul, man. Holy cow.
Yellow tang, purple tang, Tomini, Royal Grandma, checkerboard, 2 maroon alaris, 2 green bubble tips. And the rocks that the bubble tips are on. But man, that maroon alaris, and for you guys that don't know, maroon clowns and ocellaris / percula are closely related, and so they do form hybrids in the wild. But ORA produces one, I think it's called the blood orange, that is I see most often, not in fish stores, but at Petco. Oh my God, that thing was just like biting, like not just biting and like coming at my hand in the cooler, but it was biting the webbing of between my the skin between my thumb and index.
How do they know how to go for that?
I don't know. I do not know.
They
Maybe
always
it's just
do that crap.
They always do that. Yeah, but this thing is like, it's so vicious. Oh my God, I did a thing that, people are probably going to flame me for. I was trying to like adjust the anemones after I'd initially just kind of put them in the tank. So most of the fish went into quarantine with the long-term quarantine system. Those 2 and their anemones went in just like a corner of my receiving coral table. And the next day I'm trying to like adjust some stuff and just trying to make the anemones happier. And the larger maroon alaris just wouldn't stop. I flicked it out of the tank on purpose. Because I wanted to grab it. I was trying to grab it, and he just kept biting me instead. So I just kind of flicked him out of the water, kind of let him bounce off my foot, picked him off the ground, and then put him in an anemone basket. Then put him in an anemone basket. He's like essentially in jail while I'm trying to fix up her tank. And then I let her out and just immediately goes straight back to biting. That fish it's funny how some fish, like, they don't even skip a beat.
The most aggressive fish in my tank is my female percula. I mean, she just, to other fish, not just to me, but, when I introduce new fish, I was like, oh, are the tangs going to harass this fish to death? I don't really, it's odd. My cold tang and my convict tang are pretty mellow, and they're just like, oh, hey, what's up? Mm-hmm. My percula and her little mate set up right in the middle of the freaking tank. So, these cruisers like tangs, angelfish that go by the middle of the tank, going left or right, they just deal with this angry percula. And it's just funny that a clownfish, I guess, damselfish and all, and that whole relationship down, in the lineage, it makes sense. But it's funny that, I worry about what my clownfish does to the new introductions more than say a tang.
Yeah.
But a maroon is a different beast altogether, for sure. That and like tomatoes are just, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. But I think you made a great point with that Walter AD mention of cordoning off the reef and removing the herbivores. Like, you can't win by eliminating the nutrients, because everything needs some. And I've learned that more, in a greater depth to that lesson with my corals, as far as like actually aiming to try to keep my phosphates and nitrates up. So yeah, nice to have a bunch of new tangs to add to the population.
Nice. Yeah. No, that's quite a haul.
Now, some fish that I've had for a while that I'm like, I know you love, but I got a pair of Australian stark-eye clownfish about this time last year, or like later last year, and just like, they were small and pretty and colorful, but now they're starting to reach a size like not 3 inches but 2 inches, where they're just like really elegant, and I'm realizing I need more. I need more. I want more of the Australian stark eyes, and I want a couple of the Filipino stark eyes. Slightly different. Almost no one would ever notice the difference, but I just love that fish so much. I know you've had some in the past, right?
Yeah, you helped me buy one. It was, I think, in Columbia, South Carolina, and I had that thing forever. Oh, yeah. And when it got to like a good, almost like 3-inch size, that's probably an exaggeration.
They'll get to like a showy 3 inches, yeah.
And their blue scales are big. It's not like this dense matrix of scales. It looks like armor, and it just it glows. That was an amazing fish. I've been wanting to get another one, but I haven't. I do have a cheapy azure damsel, but and the price has gone up on them quite a bit. I think the cat's out of the bag on them, and the freight. You're right. Yeah.
The freight is freaking crazy right now. But yeah, I've had them for about a year. I see them from my desk all day long. It's funny how much you can see a fish, but sometimes you have to like look at a fish to really take it in. And I'm looking at both of them like, oh my, you guys are really coming along nicely. Just colorful, and the weird chainmail pattern for their super large scales. When they're like 3 inches, their scales aren't blue anymore. They're like black with a blue hexagon in the center. Such a freaking cool fish, man.
I just wish I could get, because to me they were the poor man's version of a resplendent angelfish.
Yeah, they are the perfect example of convergent evolution between two different groups of a bright blue fish with a yellow top and kind of similarly shaped bodies. How crazy would it be if someone in the future could keep a tank of some resplendents and some stark eyes together? I wonder how they would react to each other.
Well, think about how many fish there are that are the blue and yellow combo, right? Hepatis tangs. The list goes on quite a bit. Like, what's this? I'm sure some scientist is pondering that question, or maybe already has, but there is so many fish with the blue and yellow, even Red Sea purple tangs, right?
Yeah.
They're pretty navy bluish.
I think a fun question is, for me, what I pondered more is why so many yellow tails.
Yeah, what's with those
so
tails?
Many yellow tails? How many angelfish have yellow tails? Emperor, Chrysaorus, lots of pygmies, purple tang. There's 2 white-tail tangs, right? The Tomini and the white-tail tang. Then we have the damselfish, and it just seems like the yellowtail. There's so many things named Xanthurus. At the end, you're like, man, what is going on with these yellowtails? Is it some kind of a distraction? As a fish is coming at them, they can just kind of flap it, and it just confuses the predator? I don't know. That sounds like a whole PhD thesis for a fish, behavioralist or evolutionary biologist. That would be a very fun question to answer.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's theories on it, but yeah, I don't know. That's that whole color theme. You could do a whole tank on blue yellow fish.
Yeah, absolutely. Royal Grammas are purple with yellow back. And there's so many little basslets. All right, if we go down this train, we'll just be sitting here listing off like a good 10% of the reef fish out in the wild. Kind of talking about some Flake Food, man.
Yeah, actually, that's a good one. I saw that you brought that up in your notes, and knowing that I actually, the thing that I just recently had with my fish bloating because I was overfeeding, and it was right after the flakes, and I started reintroducing them and all as well, but which made me glad because I actually like feeding flakes.
Your fish are good?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're rocking again.
Oh, yeah.
It was a little scary moment, but yeah.
I think Flake Food has gotten a bad rap because the Flake Food sold in fish stores is trash.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just without hesitation, I could tell you that if it's that for so many reasons that we're about to get into, it's just wrong. First of all, flakes are made like very large. And as soon as you use a machine to put them into a container, you end up with a ton of dust. And I'm sure a lot of people will agree, with a lot of modern products, whether it's detergent or fluids or just recipes, you open up a container or Flake Food, and first of all, it's already down by like half or a quarter, right? They fill it with some nitrogen in there to keep it nice and fresh. I'm like, no, give me my food, right? But then when you work your way through the flake and you get down to the bottom, you end up with like 10 to 25% essentially dust. Like, what are you supposed to do with that dust? So you're paying for this subpar food that's machine packed that ends up with a ton of dust. And I'd say one of the few exceptions probably is going to be the Seachem Aquavitro flake is pretty good. I'm sure it's still machine packed, and the PE Mysis is also pretty good, but it's just not an awesome value, man. I burn through that stuff. Like the PE pellets, oh my god, I've been working on like 1 pound buckets of that stuff for like 2 years. But the flake, I mean, I just burn through it. And I don't know if you've been to like many freshwater like club meetups, but man, I will drop in on the killifish guys, the Placo guys, the African cichlid guys, and there's always an old guy there with like a giant trash bag filled with flakes the size of your face. And he's gonna sell you like $3 a handful, something weird like that. And it's like, it smells good. It smells rich. It's almost crispy in your hand. Like you kind of almost need to like break it up to get it into a bag or something. And so that made me realize like the best flake foods I've ever come across at fish stores, this is probably a dying art, was the bulk fish food that you might get. I think OSI used to have a program for that in fish stores, but it's been years since I've actually seen that kind of food available. So
I was about to say the OSI spirulina flakes were killer.
Yes. That's what got me on the hunt. I'm like, man, this stuff has to be around. And through trial and error, I've ordered like bulk flake foods from a bunch of different companies on Amazon, on freaking Amazon, because you can't find the stuff on saltwateraquarium.com, Premium Aquatics, Bulk Resupply, Aqua Cave, that fish place. Just trying to name, like, they don't do that anymore. That's if it's not just easily like packaged and easily shipped, they don't even deal with it anymore. So I was like, man, there's got to be some of these invested aquarists who have a lot of fish who make their own food, and I found a few different great ones. One of them is a medicated food that has it comes in a bag. It's like, it's crispy. It smells of garlic. Like every time I feed it, I'm like, ooh, yeah. And we already touched on garlic more as appetite stimulant than as actual probiotic or whatever. But it has praziquantel. It has levamisole, I think, or metronidazole, some kind of dewormer. It has Epsom salt in there to prevent bloating.
Yeah, my question is the bloating piece, because magnesium is pretty damn abundant in seawater. So
there is that. So there's one. I have that medicated flake that I use in combination for my quarantining procedures. So I'll treat the water, and I know I've gotten a lot of the external stuff, and then I'll feed them that food exclusively for like 2 weeks to make sure that it's soaking into their tissues. But more recently, I went on looking for like a really good crunchy flake, and I found 2 really awesome ones. And here's the funny part: it's better and cheaper. I'm talking about cool. There's these 2 products. One's called Cool Mysis and Cool Kelp. And these flakes, man, they look like they were carefully laid into this 1 pound container. It's $20 for a pound. And these flakes are so big and crispy. You look at the whole container is clear. There's not a dust. There's not one dust one crumble at the bottom of the container. Now you compare that with like the cost of these other fish foods that are 10 to 25% crumbles and dust. I'm like, wow. So it's from Brine Shrimp Direct. They've been around forever. I believe they invented golden pearls, one of the oldest old school, coral foods and baby fish foods.
Yeah.
I think you introduced me to that when I was at your place in 2001 with your green Slimer dominated tank of the month. But yeah, Brine Shrimp Direct, and I'm sure like stores could get these from Brine Shrimp Direct, but it's $20 for this low temperature processed, really intact flake foods. And man, sometimes it just takes a little bit of searching or just kind of going outside the norm to find what you're looking for. I'll tell you what, man, this cool kelp is way better than the OSI's, standard spirulina flake that we're used to. It's chunky. And you look at the ingredients list, you're like, I want to eat that.
Yeah. I'll have to check that out actually, because I'm a lazy guy when it comes to the frozen food. I'm trying to do better in that regard. Just out of curiosity to see if I actually notice a difference. But yeah, I mean, I'm a hardcore flake and pellet guy. I've been using a lot of the what are they called? I forget. They're like one of the most common marine flakes out there.
Ocean Nutrition?
Yes, thank you, Ocean Nutrition. But
not to be confused with Reef Nutrition. Yeah, all the names overlap. It's hard to keep track of which one you're actually trying to think of.
Yeah, and it's okay. I mean, my fish eat it. I tried the one that you recommended recently that was packed in like a little white jar that is like a mixture of like copepods and
spirulina Pro. Yeah, so that's also hand-packed.
Yeah, and that one my fish definitely like. I've been more of a pellet guy, to be honest. And I've always been a hardcore fan of shoot, why am I drawing all these blanks today? The blue lidded jar, you know what I'm talking about, like
that's not Ocean Nutrition too?
No, the famous pellet guys that got their start in Cichlid World.
Oh, New Life Spectrum.
New Life Spectrum. But recently I started doing I did order up some of the Reef Nutrition pellets. The and those are like my fish. I know it's all anecdotal, like is a fish happy or whatever, but they really dig on those. And so I thought, okay, I'll mix those in, and been blending them all together in a jar and just kind of distributing them in the tank. So, but I have been on the hunt for a flake. I was actually thinking about the OSI spirulina a long time recently about how I used to feed that a long time ago. So the fact that you started talking about these flakes got me thinking, oh man, I wonder if that's still around. But then you answered my question of where I could find something better.
It's like the least exciting topic to hit, the top of Reddit / Aquarium subreddit, But if you've been keep feeding fish for a long time, and you find a flake food like this that you think is going to start to approximate frozen food, I mean, it's again, you just have to see it, just literally seeing it. In so many ways. It's $20 for a pound. I got a pound of each, and I think that's going to last me a long time. Just really substantial stuff. Just
nice.
Every little bit helps. Every little bit helps. I think the pellets in the hobby are so much better because they're machine made. They're they don't crumble up in the container, in shipping, in handling. They're super easy to dispense from an automatic fish feeder. So we don't have the same difference, whereas flake food is just barely there, and then pellets have thrived and gotten really, really good.
My only beef with pellets, especially if you get into small fish, is you start to have to provide different sizes of them. And the one upside about flake is, you can see like a tiny firefish grab the biggest old flake, and it just bites off a chunk, or it spits it out all chewed up into little bits, and then it, grabs like the smallest bit that it spit out. So it's kind of funny with flake, like it can be super big, but even the little guys can figure out to get a chunk off of it.
Even corals, you can see corals and anemones catching this stuff.
Yeah,
you see a 1/4-inch flake stuck to an oversized acropora axial polyp. You're like, get it, boy.
Yeah.
Go get it, man. That's always super impressive. So yeah, I know people are going to ask again. That's Cool Mysis and Cool Kelp, Brine Shrimp Direct on Amazon, and I'm sure that Brine Shrimp Direct wholesales to your local fish store if they want to bring it in themselves.
And that's a good mixture too. You could probably mix the two together, or I
That's
mean,
exactly
not
what
in
I
the
did.
same. Okay, there you go.
That's exactly what I did. I took a, like,
Yeah.
I took a spare New Life Spectrum container that was clear, and I put, an even mix of each, tumbled it around a little bit, and we're off to the races. I think I got enough flake food for at least 6 months.
All right, here's a dumb question for you since we're on the subject. Remember how we were told to never feed freshwater fish to lionfish or scorpionfish because they don't have the right fatty acids and all of that, and
Yes.
you should source your food from marine, right? But aren't
Yes.
mice
Oh
egg
yeah,
freshwater?
that was the yep.
And that is like
Yep,
the
yep,
most
yep, yep.
popular food in the hobby from a protein source is mycet, right?
Well, like everything else, man, these generalizations, if you are militant about them, they'll get
Yeah.
you in trouble, right? So the trouble with most freshwater fish is they have fish, vertebrates. They have a lot more, I believe, this is, again, generalizing, omega 6s. So like goldfish and tilapia. I don't know how many freshwater fish meats have been analyzed, but I don't know that much as I do about omega 3s. But my understanding is that omega 6s are like the opposite of omega 3s, right? If you eat like a lot of salmon in your life, you're going to have good brain health and circulation and vision. I think that's how that works. And if you eat like a lot of tilapia, or say you're in a rural community in a developing country, and you're really counting on tilapia for your protein, you will have some, you will develop certain dietary conditions over time, right? So I don't know how much of that was absolute when it says freshwater or saltwater derived, but I do know
Yeah.
that the freshwater side of it, and the vertebrates, that was not good. And once again, I'm not quite sure why cyclopes and mysis are better. I think it has to do with their Arctic conditions, right? Because PE mysis and cyclopes come from high latitude Arctic lakes that get like massive sun exposure for very long periods of time. And that's why the Hikari mysis from China, which is not equatorial, but definitely lower down the latitude, they don't see that much exposure, and they're just kind of like normal small mysis. I mean, you see the difference when if you feed Hikari mysis versus Piscean energetics mysis. You have to rinse the PE mysis sometimes 2 or 3 times, whereas the Hikari, you can just kind of pop it out and roll.
Yeah. And I mean, I know I'm comparing apples to oranges, right? Freshwater guppies, feeder guppies, goldfish are a different story than, who knows, maybe on the invertebrate scale, like shrimps and stuff, this is not so much of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody much smarter than me can explain that, but I've always just kind of been curious because, to your, like you sort of alluded to, and what my question was is, I was always, like, oh, don't feed too many freshwater food sources to your marine organisms, and then it's like, you got mysid shrimp and
Lettuce.
freshwater copepods and lettuce. Romaine lettuce is another good one. Yeah,
Lettuce and lettuce and lettuce.
but yeah,
And
I don't know.
live blackworms, right? You want to breed
Oh
any
yeah,
fish, freshwater or saltwater, give them some live blackworms. So maybe that rule of thumb pertained more to the vertebrates than the invertebrates, even though we
yeah,
didn't have the cross spectrum knowledge of stuff. All right, can I take a U-turn or
yeah.
a
Go
detour?
for it, man. I know you got some good ones.
I have decided that I have almost enough fish at the studio. And for a long
Almost.
time, yeah, yeah, oh yeah, no, you're never gonna have all the fish ever, right? But I set up this 150-gallon mode rack with 3 tiers to really be able to bring fish in,
Yeah.
and quarantine and condition them and isolate them as needed. But for about a year and a half, the top row hasn't even been running. I just shut that one completely down because I wasn't bringing in that many fish, and I just kind of realized. I think it was like this weekend. I was looking at it. I was like, you know what? I think I want to put all my anemones in here. So I think I'm going to convert my 3-tiered mode rack to house all my anemones, in their respective places. So what am I sitting on right now? I got a large rideri, couple of some large sunbursts. Man, those things are growing fast, and mine split, and when they're large, and when they're done splitting, they're like still really large. I don't have these tiny little fairy-looking sunburst anemones. I got a handful of Nexus bursts. I have a red malu. I have 2 pizza anemones, and I'm sure I'm forgetting 1 or 2 out there. But I would also love to get, really want like the bluest, like fake blue colored carpet anemone, and some condies. Some condi lactis anemone. I just think they're the freaking coolest anemone. When you get it happy, man, that thing will outshine most bubble tips. Not all. It's kind of hard to top a sunburst.
Peterman shrimp in there, and man, you got.
You know how much I want to, but like trying to start that hunt for the invertebrates that used to, if you hit up like a handful of fish stores in a decent area, you would come across some pom-pom crabs and periclemines and anemone shrimp and porcelain crabs, and now it's like pulling teeth. I ordered a while back. I ordered a gold coral banded shrimp for $30, and I got a regular coral banded shrimp. I was just so deflated, I didn't even bother complaining about it. It's like, man, I'm not going to spend over $30 on a small, normal coral banded shrimp. Man, what do you think this is? I wanted the gold one, specifically that one. It was a WYSIWYG specimen. Arrgh. I want to go down those paths. But anyway, I think it's going to be fun, but it's going to do 2 things. One, I need to get the last few fish on my hit list that I know I want, so I can get them, condition them, get them out in the tanks, and just kind of, put a cap in that. And then, oh my God, it's going to be the easiest conversion ever. I don't know what I need to do. I am thinking about using a very old recirculating H&S protein skimmer with a new controllable pump on there. You might have seen this H&S skimmer on the old Aquamart Aquapora display tank. I have that.
Really?
Yeah, it's recirculating style with a very small, just normal Aqua Bee pump. But man, that thing just works like freaking crazy. So yeah, I think I'm going to put that on this tank, and I'll still keep 2 10-gallon hospital/quarantine tanks, but one of them's for corals. But I can always throw up a medium-sized tank if I get something a little bit larger on a dime. But I don't expect to be doing that nearly as much anymore. And very excited to get all those anemone baskets just out of my coral tanks. Well, I'll have better flow and presentation of the coral tables, but then I'll finally be able to see my anemones in an aquarium the way they were meant to be.
So what's your take? I know some of the folks that are really into anemones advise against mixing species or genuses. Something about seeing like a decline of one over the other. Any concerns about that by throwing them into like a system that's shared water?
I have had them because I've been growing sunbursts since before they hit the scene. They were just like a local phenomenon, and I thought people were crazy for spending $300 on them, which is retarded. Just astronomical price for a bubble tip for 2005. So I did have some initial reservations. I will. Now that you mention it, I'm going to have to set up an anemone quarantine tank where anemones go in there and just get treated and just get isolated before they mix. But no, I have my Nexus burst next to my Ritterite. My Nexus burst in a basket next to a Ritterite in a basket next to the sunburst in the basket. So they're like all downstream from each other.
Oh, okay.
And I've had also some of the malus and some. I do have also the 2 pizzas. They're not so in the mode system. They're not going to be all together, right? I got 6 different compartments.
Yeah.
So probably the biggest one will be for the Ritterite, and we'll let him settle in and see what he does. But the thing that's cool about them, they all have like perfect pre-filters at the surface and at the bottom. All the flow can be provided by the return, so I might tweak the nozzles a little bit, put a little bit more of a flare on them, or a little bit more of a clover on them, turn up the return pump a little bit more to get a little bit more of that velocity. But then this is like the perfect anemone system with no power heads from that get sucked into, and dual drains, because there's a surface and a subsurface drains, so they're not going to block both of them at the same time. And I think it'll be freaking awesome with no equipment in there.
I went down the anemone tank route a few years ago because I had to move my big tank into the basement, and then it was like, well, let's just set up a little cube tank upstairs so there's still something. And the goal was, back then the captive bred lattice and Attis clowns were popping up on Live Aquarium all the time. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna do just a big old rose bubble tip cube. When I say big, I mean this thing was like, only 35 gallons, but and then put some Lats clowns in there and let that be the busy part of the house, little reef nook, right? And I had there was somebody, I think his username was Anemone on. I'm friends with him on Facebook. I forget what his RC Reef Central username was, but he had, back before RBTAs really took off, he just had these great maroon colored rose bubble tips that were real long and stringy, and they'd beat up under really intense lighting. And he sent me one as a friend, and that thing would split all day long. Like if I let it, I'd just have I would have had a 180-gallon tank full of rose bubble tips. So that was what was in my head. So I go and buy these tiny little rose bubble tips off of, various sites, and they all just dwindled. And I couldn't figure out why. Part of it I thought was because the Lats clowns were pretty big, and they're just pounding these tiny little rose bubble tips. Like maybe if I had started with some larger colonies that could take the abuse of a large clown. Like imagine putting like a maroon. Obviously my clowns weren't as big as maroon, but maybe there's a size proportion thing between host and hostee, right? I don't know, but it was a complete failure, which was so disheartening because that would have been like the perfect little setup to have, in the, when I don't want to run down to the basement and admire what I'm doing down there. But yeah, I don't know. What's the scoop on that? To me, is like that.
I don't know, obviously if you have a thumb-sized bubble tip that's trying to put up with like a large clownfish, those odds are stacked, right? But there's definitely some biological microbial aspect to
that's what I wondered. Yeah.
RBT, bubble tip anemone decline, right? I think it just named a disease, BTAD. And people are aware of it. People have thrown various treatments at it. I think, people have just shot in the dark with the ciprofloxacin. But those protocols are super loose and they're not super guaranteed. And I don't know what the answer is, honestly.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you got me to think about it. Because I kept throwing more in there to try to distribute the attention of the clown to other, and it did. It danced around, but yeah, the one I got from my friend was like massive, right? Like that thing was like a 7-inch BTA that just took, like I had to move corals out of the way. And anyway,
I've seen some in the wild, man, that are just like, I've seen some. It's weird. There's a strange dichotomy when it comes to Entacmia quadricolor. Either you see them in the shallows and it just kind of look like whatever $30, $50, bubble tip you'd see at the fish store, but it's like a field of them, and it'll be like so many cinnamon clownfish, Amphiprions melanopus, and maroons. If there's enough anemones go around, they'll just kind of like make their own little ghettos. Or if you're diving a little deeper, you'll see one which is glowing red, like the reddest red you've ever seen. Yeah. That's like 2 or 3 feet across, and you're just like, why are some of them clonal and they create these massive stands of bubble tips, and others are just like huge and just like jaw-dropping? I don't know what that is. Like sometimes you'll see a sunburst anemone, let's say medium size, 5-6 inches, and it just knocks your socks off. And other times I'll go see the same strain in very large tank with perfect conditions, growing corals, and it's just long and stringy, but it's not showing the color that you expect from one of these anemones. And I don't think there's a simple answer, man. In one of my videos I'm going to show off at Reef Currents, I literally have a video of like a little grove of bubble tips. Most of them are bubbly. Then there's one off to the side that's stringy. You're like, what? Or on the flip side, currently, my sunburst goes back and forth. If the spot cinctus clownfish kind of sneaks into that basket, like she almost has to jump over the rim, it will go from bubbly to loose like that. And I know some people have had the opposite experience. Or like right now, it's kind of got stringy tentacles. The other day, I turned off the flow, just admiring its color, and I just touched the base just a little bit. Within 15 seconds, every tentacle was bubbled. I was like, what the hell? I didn't, I need to document that because that was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah,
So,
mine
but yeah,
was under
anemones, man.
halides and was long and stringy. It wasn't bubble tip. The funny thing about bubble tip is, when you go scuba dive into a region that you've scuba dived a lot of places, but when you see corals, you're like, oh, that's a leather coral. But there's certain corals that when I first saw them in the wild, there was definitely that like, oh man, like, because there's just certain corals that I just equate to the aquarium hobby. And obviously you see tons of corals in the wild that you have in your aquarium, but there's always that like, holy crap, I'm looking at a wild version of blah, and that happened to me with a rose bubble tip when I saw a wild one for the first time. And then blastos. When I first saw like a colony of blastos, I was like, what? Like that's
Yeah.
it was just
amazing.
A cool feeling to be like, I know what that is, So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, do you want to wrap it up with, I guess, one of our newest developments here on Reef Therapy?
The book club?
The book club. Oh my God.
The feedback on that was pretty strong.
I was literally doing like the swan song for Aquarium books on the last session, and I could not believe the feedback and the response that we got from the viewers and the listeners. And I just think it'd be so much fun to pick a book, tell the viewers and listeners what we're going to do, and then a month later, we're going to review that book. And I think you and I have decided to do like a TikTok cycle where we reach back in the past for a very old classic book, and then we try for the next month to do a more contemporary book that's going to appeal to more modern viewers and listeners.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, you can provide, I think, more old books, but also maybe stuff that is slightly outside of the genre as well, that may not appeal to everyone. Now, those maybe don't warrant a discussion, right? Like where you spend a book review on it, but just putting those out in the ether of like, hey, if this is a subject matter that interests you, there are some cool books about very specific things or organisms in our hobby, for example, too. But yeah, I'm with you.
I think perfect shoe-in for the first two books. And here's the thing, some of the new books you actually can totally get new, but the old books, you're going to have to, if you don't have it or don't have a friend who has it, you're going to have to dig around the back shelf of your fish store or Amazon or eBay. One pro tip on Amazon, a lot of times like a crazy price will come up, and if you just look at the fine print, it'll have a used option for like 10% of the price. You can get so many of these great books for $5 to $10 shipped. So you already announced the first book we want to review?
Well, I can tell you who the author is. The title's so long I'm probably going to butcher it. But
The Marine Aquarium Reference, Systems and Invertebrates by Martin Moe. I feel like this is probably the most hands-on, like sensible saltwater aquarium book that influenced so many after it. Like there was plenty of saltwater aquarium token books before that, but this book right here, this is the hardcover. The paperback is like blue, yellow, and white.
That's the one I have. Yeah, it's somewhere on that bookshelf over there.
You'll pay more in shipping than you will on the book.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about old books. It might be easy to dismiss some of them and say, oh, how does that going to talk to me about a refugium or LED lighting or needle whale protein skimmers? It's not going to touch on that at all. It's going to drill down to even more fundamental ideas. Then we're not going to take it cover to cover. Him and I we'll skim some stuff and just point out some of the things that some of the sections that really caught our attention, because man, if you think you have a really original idea, you probably just haven't read enough of the old literature where the old guys might have said it in a different way. So the Marine Aquarium Reference, Systems and Invertebrates by Martin A. Moe Jr. Definitely feels like the shoe-in to talk about. He did so many other cool books, man. What else did he do? He did the
breeding one, the fish breeding one.
It was the Orchid Dottie bag.
Yeah,
it was like journal style. I remember when that came out, read it cover to cover. And then the funnest one was the Marine Aquarist's quiz book, which I think was so much fun. I used to play that play like a moderator with that at the fish store because I'd already read it cover to cover, so I couldn't play. But it was like a fun trivia thing that like any reef club could pick up today. I don't know how well tuned the questions are to modern reefers, but yeah, this is gonna be a good book, and I'm just looking forward to setting a personal challenge for you and I to just revisit this stuff because it's gonna jar some old ideas and implant new ones.
Yeah, and the other thing too is it's fun to, I mean, if you go out and get the book, cool. That's a huge step. But also just looking into who that author is, right? Like Mo's, he's if you don't know who he is, I mean, he's done a lot, right? Not just for the hobby, but I mean, to circle back to our conversation about how important herbivores are on a reef, right? When we had this massive die-off of urchins in the Florida reefs, and subsequently we lost a lot of coral and there was a lot of algae outbreaks, right? Mo was the one breeding urchins, trying to figure out what was going on with them in his Florida Keys lab, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of cool, I guess, backstories on that guy that if you don't know who he is, just go Google him. You know, there's a lot going on.
I think it's fair
there.
to say he was Julian Sprung's Julian Sprung. Boom.
Right,
Another
there you
Julian
go.
Sprung reference here. There. Cool. Well, I think on that note, that's a fun little, just kind of a mixed episode. We'll try to have something a little more cohesive next time. This session, we just kind of want to have a little mixed bag of different topics to talk about because that's how the therapy goes. You know, just never know what's gonna come up and what's gonna strike our fancy. Any parting words, Mr.
No,
Mark?
just I guess I mean, to be honest, you know, I was sitting there struggling about a topic, but then the thing about us is that we go on so many tangents to begin with that even if we go free form, like you can see what happens, like we end up in some interesting discussions anyway. So, but yeah, now I got to go dig up my Martin A. Moe book. I know it's somewhere in my house.
Yeah.
I'll find it.
Very cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on the 21st session of Reef Therapy. And thanks to everyone who's subscribed on the Reef Therapy standalone YouTube channel. If you haven't, go check it out. If you're listening to it a podcast, make sure to rate us on your favorite podcatcher and tell a friend, man. This has been one of the most poignant pieces of content that we've ever created out of reef builders, and I know it's resonating with a lot of people. People have commutes, but the best thing, man, you know what we should do? We should have a session that's specifically about aquarium maintenance, so people can do aquarium maintenance while listening to aquarium maintenance, so we can make it even more meta. I would love that.
That'd be funny, especially if we do it around in a way it's like, okay, by now you'll be working on your protein skimmer, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, maybe we should do aquarium maintenance while recording Reef Therapy so that other people can do the same. Like, all right, this is the process. Scrape the glass, do your mechanicals, test some water, do your protein skimmer, clean your venturi. Maybe just take somebody through the entire process because they might be missing a couple steps.
There you go.
You never know.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, well, thanks for joining me again, Mark. Thanks for everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you again next week for another session.
Yeah. Catch you on the next one.
All right, bye, guys.